I call the Honourable Minister, Dr Nick Smith.
Mr Chairman, firstly I want to compliment members that have contributed to this debate. It is a pretty tricky balance between the property rights that the National Party holds dear, that people that create items that have got value, music, film and the like, are able to secure the value from those creative endeavours, with a rather pretty important right, and that's the right of freedom. And the National Party was founded on some very basic principles about freedom of expression and the state being limited in the degree in which it can constrain freedom of expression and the general freedoms that we enjoy as New Zealand citizens. I want to put on record, though, the pretty chequered history around this issue, noting some of the contributions that have been made by Labour members. I don't proclaim to be an expert on copyright law. I want to commend the job that the Minister of Commerce, Simon Power, has done in this area. I, like so many members of this House, have had to become familiar with this issue because of the huge furore that was created by the passage of 92A. I have to tell you, 92A almost became, for anybody that was in an electorate office or looking at MP's mail or at the Nelson Market, I wasn't even too sure the first time I heard 92A which bill it was about. But literally it was thousands and thousands of people that were agitated by the bill that was passed by a previous government in 2008 that got us into this pickle, and Simon Power and this government has had to work through this in a balanced and sensible way. And I think the provisions that have been provided in the bill, and particularly the work that's been done very constructively by the Select Committee, gets us to a very sensible balance between those competing rights. There's a couple of specific points that I want to respond to in the debate. Claire Curran entered into the debate about Television 7 and the creative industries. Well, I've got to tell you, like in so many areas, I've got to tell the House, in so many areas, the previous government left these financial landmines that went off all the government. With respect to TV7, the previous government funded it for a limited period and said that it was going to become self-sustaining. And whether it's the work that Simon Power's been doing today in legal aid, whether it's the mess that I was left in ACC, whether it's some problems that so many of my ministerial colleagues are dealing with, the previous government, and look, I look at the area health boards and some of the huge deficits that were there, is that the previous government was financially reckless, set up programs that were unaffordable and in these tight fiscal times. And I challenge Labour members that are interjecting, simple question, do they commit to funding TV7? Well, on the one hand, they cry and protest that this government, with all the challenges of the Christchurch earthquake, of the global recession, is having to make difficult decisions. We have an impassioned plea from Claire Curran that the decisions we've made about TV7 are absolutely awful and we should fund it. And I simply ask Claire Curran the question again, will Labour fund it? The silence is deafening. The silence is deafening. We have a Labour opposition that is playing politics and is not prepared to commit their opinion to say that they would fund it. It truly shows how hollow those criticisms of Claire Curran are. Now, I want to come to the thoughtful question that came from David Parker with respect to the issues around copyright and the Trans-Pacific Partnership discussions. And the first point I want to make about the discussions is that, and look, it's really interesting, isn't it? And the member interjects that the negotiations with the Trans-Pacific Partnership are occurring in secret. Well, I have a simple challenge for her. when her party was in government and was negotiating, Mr Chairman,
I call the Honourable Minister.
and was negotiating the free trade agreement with China, were they all held in the open? Rubbish. They were not. Exactly the same protocols about negotiation of the free trade agreement that occurred with China occurs that with the US. But you know, we all understand in this House that there is a ugly anti-American language, probably amongst that. I think it was a gaggle that one of the Labor members referred to. I think it was the self-interested trade unionists, of which was referred to, around the anti-Americanism that goes. Well, I and members on this side of the House are proud to say a free trade agreement with the United States would be good for living standards of New Zealanders, good for trade, and providing we can get an agreement that's in New Zealand's interests, that is something of which we are going to advance. But I also want to clarify this issue for Mr Parker. He assumes that all of the copyright issues between New Zealand and the United States are one way. Well, that is to significantly discount the huge creative industries that exist in New Zealand. Let's take Dave Dobbin, a wonderful musician, and his musical product of Loyal, right? Should he be able to claim the copyright and the value for that particular production? And we, as a party of property rights, say Dave Dobbin deserves to be able to protect the property rights of his creation, and so should other talented musicians and filmmakers that this national government is very keen to be able to advance and to protect those sorts of talents. And the further point I want to point a hole is that David Parker, again, typical sort of self-interested unionist, I think's the phrase, approach around saying, well, these copyright laws only benefit corporates. Only benefit corporates. Well, let me tell you the point. Let's say there is, and there's an argument to be had, how long should copyright apply? Should it be 50 years after the death of the author, or 60 years, or 70 years? And Mr Parker argues the only people that would benefit from that would be the corporates. Well, let me tell you why that perspective is incorrect. Why is that incorrect? Well, because if someone, and generally what happens with musicians, artists and films, is a person sells that right onto a corporate, and the value that they receive as an individual and a creator of that particular copyright material is dependent on how long that value is. And so actually the benefactor of any extension in the period of copyright would as much play to the benefit of the creator as it does ultimately to any person who might purchase that right. And in the sort of typical anti-business rhetoric that we continue to hear from the political left undermines New Zealand's interests in respect of those trans-Pacific negotiations. Again, Mr Chairman, I want to stress this is a really balanced and sensible response to a difficult issue, and I think this bill should be commended to the House.
I call the Honourable Member